Today our guest is Thierry Hoppe. He's the Consul General of Denmark. Thank you for accepting our invitation, Thierry. Welcome to our digital studio.
Thank you, Barak. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much. And today we are going to discuss a bit more about the ESG story of Denmark, actually. How it was started and what type of experiences you had in Denmark actually before the EU Green Deal. What was the main topic in Denmark? How you actually confront the necessities of the EU Green Deal within the Denmark? Would you please a bit more about that?
Sure. Climate issues and green transition has been a huge topic in Denmark for many decades. I would say actually it goes back to not this energy crisis, but the energy crisis I almost remember from my old childhood in the 70s. So everyone in this room is too young to remember, I think. But in the 70s, there was an oil crisis also, where a country like Denmark was, we couldn't import oil, and we couldn't get enough oil and the traditional fossil fuels. And that was a problem for Denmark that was entirely dependent on imported energy. So some very far-sighted and clever politicians took the decision to invest in this crazy new technology, wind, and try to exploit that. And that laid the ground for what is today, I would say, the Danish leadership in the green transition, and the fact that we are so far advanced in our ability to harness wind as an energy source. But that was laid as groundwork at that time, and we've developed it over the years since then. The idea was to render Denmark less dependent on imported energy, and over time also make it fossil free. So I think that's why we have become the leaders we are today. I think we're globally recognized as a leading nation, and it goes beyond, well beyond that, which is the topic of today, ESG also. So Danish companies and the Danish business community, I think, is very far ahead when it comes to implementing these concerns and try to think, the whole concept of doing no harm and corporate sustainability issues. That is something that is very high on the agenda in Denmark.
Thank you so much. And actually, how will ESG will affect the trade between Turkey and Denmark? Do you think Turkish companies are ready for ESG?
I don't know about the last question, to be very honest, but they can be. But I think how it will affect is also quite open question. But it will affect. That the answer to that is certain. I mean, there are so many things happening now where companies, because of the EU Green Deal, but also more broadly because of this EU directive that's being talked about on corporate sustainability due diligence. It's coming into effect next year and slowly sort of taking effect, and that will impose on large companies, large European companies, and so also Danish companies, to ensure that in their value chains that they abide by certain criteria, by certain ESG values, if you will. And so not only what they have traditionally done, which is in-house activities, but everything along their value chain. So back to the source of the raw materials, if you will. And that means that companies, European companies, Danish companies that work with suppliers, for instance, in Turkey, they will have to require of them many new things. So even if the legislation is European and is Danish, it will also impact countries such as Turkey that is so highly dependent on exports to Europe and to Denmark. So it's coming, but how they will prepare for it, I think that's the big question. Yes.
And I'm always thinking the SMEs, they are very small companies, even if they are mid-size, they need to do something and they don't know where to start.
Yes.
What type of actions they should take.
Yes.
How did you solve that question within Denmark?
We haven't solved it, I would say. I was just in Denmark last week, actually, to participate in a seminar, an entirely Danish seminar, where the topic was how SMEs are adapting to these things. And they are also very much wondering how will we do. But I think one of the conclusions, one of the learnings, I think, from that is that I think everyone agreed that you need to be a first mover. You need to take this head on as an opportunity rather than as a challenge. Waiting until the last minute will not help you. I think to gain a competitive advantage, you need to be among the first to implement this. It may cost you in the short run, but in the long run, it's a definite win for you. And the companies and the nations that address this faster than others will be the winners of tomorrow, I think.
Thank you. And for nearly 2 years, we are discussing Fit for 55. And after COP27, we said Fit for 57. What about the carbon targets? Do you think we will reach that goals within the Europe, or maybe when we think the whole globe? What about the climate change issues?
I mean, sometimes I'm not sure, because I'm not sure we're doing quite enough to reach those targets, unfortunately. There's quite a long way to go yet, but I think that just underlines the need to do something. And I mean, again, this is something that will impact the business community for sure. I mean, part of this EU Green Deal is also what we call the CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. So, and the idea again there is that although as a Turkish company, you might not be directly impacted by legislation in the EU, you will be indirectly, because when companies in Europe have to abide by something, it will necessarily spill over onto their suppliers, onto the partners they work with on a day-to-day basis. And this specifically here on the CBAM, the idea is that we shouldn't impose on companies in Europe something that just makes them move activities from inside EU to outside EU. So instead of having emission-heavy activities within European borders, they will simply move them to places where there is no such legislation. CBAM will ensure that companies that export to Europe will either have to meet these requirements or will have to pay, will be financially, will be imposed a financial burden if they export those products that don't meet the requirements. So either way, you will have to meet these criteria, and you will have to address this now rather than later, I think.
Yes, it will affect us. I am sure it will change us. It will change our SMEs, our big corporations. We need to take some precautions, and we need to take some concrete steps towards CBAM and the European Green Deal. And on the other hand, greenwashing is another concept.
Yes.
And what about the fighting within Denmark? How you guys fight with the greenwashing within the Denmark? Some carbon taxes, maybe some taxonomy issues. How do you solve that problem, greenwashing?
Greenwashing, it's a broad topic. I mean, I think of it as companies or organizations, institutions, stating something without really doing the work. You know, saying they're green or climate friendly or something without really abiding by it. I would say the Danish public, at least, they might be different from elsewhere, but I think it's a trend that we're seeing, that the public and the consumers are more and more sensitive to these kinds of attempts at deceiving, and they will not have it. So I think that now we're seeing in Denmark that companies that are accused of greenwashing are suffering from it, and they pay a high price. So I would say the companies should think about not just using these words. They're not marketing tools. They actually mean something. And I think that companies need to do their homework so that they can state something that is truthful and has meaning. It's too important, this topic, not to do so.
So public awareness is key, as you say.
Absolutely.
Yes, we are right, in fact. And another issue is the trade, bilateral trade between Denmark and Turkey.
Yes.
How can we increase it? What type of goods and companies we attract to Turkey? How we can attract them?
Yes.
Do you have any solutions or offers or ideas about it?
Yes, it's in a very good state actually, and since the pandemic, it has really grown exponentially, like double-digit, 30% both ways. I think it's a beautiful example of globalization, where we have a very balanced trade actually. Turkey might be exporting more goods to Denmark than the other way, but then when you count in services, it actually pretty much balances out. I think that's nice, and I think you can see in that we are good at different things, and that's what globalization is all about. I think the way things are developing is towards some call it nearshoring or sourcing in Turkey. I wouldn't say it's a revolution, but I see it in among my own colleagues. We get more and more, we experience more and more interest from Danish companies in exploring opportunities for sourcing in Turkey. So I think that's certainly something that is advantageous to Turkey and the Turkish economy. But I also have to say that as part of that, they are also looking at sustainable suppliers, and questions about sustainability comes into the equation. So again, just a call to everyone out there that they need to address these issues, because I think both Danish but European companies are increasingly sensitive to these issues, and they will demand that you meet certain criteria. So yes, but we also have a lot to offer to Turkey, and I think when it comes to our experiences and our know-how in terms of becoming energy independent and becoming energy efficient, we have a lot to teach others, not particularly Turkey, but also Turkey. So we do that very, very well, and it's one of the things that we already do it today, but we'd love to see more interest, more companies, more organizations show interest in this. I say it often, as often as I can, that the cheapest and the greenest energy is the energy you don't use. Yes. So energy efficiency, it's the cheapest energy. It really is, because you can invest in these technologies and the return on investment is often even shorter than a year. And you need to be have to be a very bad businessman to understand that that's a proposition you cannot say no to. So more people need to look into this. I think energy efficiency really is part of any successful green transformation, a key thing. And I think our experience in Denmark is second to none when it comes to that.
How do you find, how can we raise the cooperation between both countries? For instance, from academic perspective, because, ESG, the story needs to be supported by, first of all, the knowledge base, the public awareness, as we discussed earlier. How can we raise it? How can we cooperate more with Denmark?
I'm sure you could always do more, but we actually do quite a bit already, and especially on energy and energy efficiency is actually one of the areas where there is a government-to-government cooperation. So an established cooperation between ministries in Turkey and ministries and public authorities in Denmark. That's all about sharing this Danish experience and know-how. So that's something that's ongoing, I would say, and will continue. We're just now expecting a new colleague to join the team, not in Istanbul, but in Turkey, to be working on that. And we go out and spend, I would say, a fair amount of our time on doing what we call public diplomacy. So not talking to government authorities, but talking to everyone. So we try and bring in people. And just the other week at the Istanbul Economy Summit, we had probably one of the most prominent Danish speakers on green transformation. A gentleman called Finn Mortensen, who is the executive director of State of Green. It's sort of it's the window to the world of Denmark on our experiences, these 5 decades of green transformation in Denmark. He is the person that travels around and talks about it, receives delegations when they come to Denmark, and he's a very good communicator. And he came to Istanbul Economy Summit also to share his know-how and with everyone there. And I think that's the kind of thing we can do to raise awareness. But you also need to have a demand on the other side, right?
You're right.
So it's a two-way street, but we are definitely there for any and all kinds of interests there are, and we will continue this public diplomacy activity next year. More. For sure. Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing your sincere ideas today with us.
Thank you, Brooke. It was a pleasure to have you. Thank you to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Today we discuss EU Green Deal, and also we learned a lot about the ESG journey of Denmark and how we can raise the cooperation between both countries. And see you on the next interviews. Thank you so much for watching us. Thank you.